You're listening to Secure Ventures, the show that follows cutting-edge founders in the cybersecurity space to understand their plights, glories, and revolutionary products. I'm your host, Kyle McNulty. I'm also a full-time investor at InQtel, a strategic investor for the U.S. intelligence and defense communities. This show is a personal outside activity separate from and not affiliated with InQtel in any manner. All comments, opinions, and sponsorships are wholly independent. With me in this episode is Maksym Tereshchenko. Maksym is CEO and founder of Mantis Analytics, providing holistic security awareness to organizations through a social media monitoring platform. The tool combs media channels to identify risk to a customer's business and escalates alerts accordingly. I thought this would be an interesting opportunity to look at the broader security world to understand some parallels with pure cybersecurity. Maksym worked in business intelligence and product management for 2 decades before the Ukraine war inspired him to start something that would make a difference. In the episode, we talk about the war events leading to the creation of Mantis, the pivot from a focus on solely disinformation, the problems with keyword searches with the growth of generative AI, and more. This episode is brought to you by VulnCheck. VulnCheck helps teams defend against weaponized exploits by delivering the most comprehensive vulnerability and exploit intelligence in the market today. VulnCheck gives enterprise and federal teams better, faster data so they can autonomously prevent exploits and reduce risk and outpace adversaries. So what's different about VulnCheck? The company delivers its solutions to teams in machine-readable and consumable formats for a truly autonomous approach to vulnerability prioritization and exploit mitigation. VulnCheck has close to 300 million unique data points, which is 5 times the exploits of ExploitDB, and 200 plus CVEs packaged into complete detection artifacts for proactive teams. VulnCheck provides a full suite of solutions to enable teams with rapid adoption of VulnCheck data, including its community tier of offerings and its enterprise-class solutions, exploit and vulnerability intelligence, and initial access intelligence. With VulnCheck, teams can proactively defend against remote execution events, enrich every data source, and continuously outpace adversaries. If you're interested in learning more about VulnCheck and checking out the free community edition where you can play with their database of known exploit vulnerabilities, please click the link in the show description so they know you came from the podcast. Just to make sure everything's loading in properly, and then we'll get into it. But looks like we're coming through clearly. All right. Maksym, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah. Hi, Kyle. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's great to get a chance to talk to you a little bit more about everything you've been building and your kind of longer career journey and getting to where you are with Mantis today. But let's go back towards the beginning of your career, because you have very fitting experience for what you're building today, which is a lot of work spent in business intelligence. You spent over a decade in a variety of business intelligence roles across a handful of different tech companies, largely in Ukraine. Tell me a little bit more about that experience and how your kind of early career path in business intelligence framed how you think about the kind of risks facing a modern business.
Absolutely. I have a pretty interesting career path in terms of that. I started from very big corporations and companies. On early stage of my career, I worked in Deutsche Bank, in AT&T, and such kind of big organizations with thousands of people. And I was responsible for building big data and business intelligence platform. First of all, as a business BI developer, and after that, grow to team lead and project manager. And in some moment of career, I just understood that I'm a little bit tired about this corporate stuff and moved more in startup world. And I worked in several US-based data startups like Zoom Data and Conductor and so on, in more dynamic sphere. So basically, I dedicated all my career to work with data, to building analytical reports, analysis, AI-driven big data platforms, and so on. And I think this career path will be continuing, but everything is changed in 2022, when war started. And in short, I was in Kiev when war started, and in short, the building near my maternity hospital when I was born and my sister was born was hit by a Russian missile. And that was a crazy moment for me, because I recognized that we we don't live in the safe world anymore. And like the first thought, like, okay, what can I do as a product manager, as a project manager in data? So in this case, answer was, I can build something like in terms of technology to help this make this world more safe place in terms of the resilience to live, to doing business, because I'm completely lost this feeling, right? So that's how I came to the point when I am now.
So let's just jump ahead a little bit further then, right? Because it's a very unique situation that you were put in, and obviously it's just such a challenging situation to be in as well. There's so many different ways that data can prove relevant in any sort of kind of adversarial conflict, let's say. How did you arrive at the specific approach of Mantis in terms of collecting data about various events and kind of communicating that to organizations, as opposed to some of the other ways that you could have potentially leveraged data? What did that kind of selection process look like for you?
Absolutely. It's a very interesting question, because we did some kind of path to this decision. Because initially in Mantis, we started from cognitive security, because when like war actually started, it was like war in several directions in parallel, right? In cybersecurity, in informational security, in like physical battlefield, like everything in parallel, and everything is connected, right? That is like main characteristics of the modern warfare. That's it's happened in really separate direction, and everything is connected, everything is related. So in this case, when war started, also like crazy informational war has been started. A lot of disinformation, propaganda, and so on was spread in Ukrainian media space. And in this case, our like first decision was, okay, how we can help with that, right? How we can protect our informational space, protect like people from this influence. And we started to work with specifically with the cognitive security. It's managing disinformation, propaganda, monitoring like Russian informational space, and so on and so on. And so that's why that's how we work it, like basically 1 year and a half, something like that. But I think like this cognitive security and informational security is mostly application in government sector, right? In some point of the startup development, when we like raised our first money and finish it like accelerator and so on, we started to think, okay, how we can apply our like technology and methodology to corporate sector specifically. And also we have some kind of constraints. For example, one of constraints that we want to build real-time ML company, right? Because, for example, my previous startups that I worked on, we developed a real-time ML data warehouse. So in this case, I see like great potential in building real-time ML companies, real-time ML solution. Because one thing is just create AI model. Another thing, like make it work with low latency, right? So it's two different things. In this case, we started to think, okay, how we can do like basically the same what we do in Gov, but with real time. Whereas like real time is important, because like for brand management, so for such kind of things, real time is not super important. Like we can just like analyze data for previous week or something like that if we take care about brand reputation and so on. But where is the real time is really important, it's in situation awareness in corporate, right? Because especially if there is like GSOC department which monitor security situation across thousands of locations around the world. So in this case, real time is very important, because late reaction can cost a lot. So that's why we decided just to apply our technology specifically for tracking incidents as early as possible, and do like visualization, alerts, and everything around that.
Okay, so you started focused on this kind of disinformation piece and then expanded. Tell me a little bit more about that kind of early process and what that looked like. Like, how successful were you in being able to detect some of this disinformation that was going on? This was obviously a very kind of key problem in the early days of the conflict.
Absolutely. Like first problem that we saw on the market at the beginning of the war, and you see that in the situation of crisis, everything's changed like dramatically, right? So that's why we need to spend like money and resources and peaceful time to prepare, because when just war like started, right? Like everything changed dramatically. So I think as the count of disinformation, propaganda, deepfake videos exponentially grow just in few days, right? Because just Russians, they like specifically prepared for that, right? And if you remember, there are a lot of deepfakes video in the first days that Zelensky left the country, something like that. And it was a crazy impact on the people, because in the first day, most of the people in state of the shock, right? And it's in such kind of states, it's very easily to impact people, influence them. So in this case, the first task for us, it's how monitor such kind of big amount of information with basically like flooding social media and so on, especially if media space is not controlled, right? Because, for example, one of the popular like social media or messenger, it's a Telegram in Eastern Europe and Ukraine and so on, and we use Telegram just to get the news, like messaging and so on. And Telegram is perfect for spreading such kind of things like disinformation, because it's nobody control, it's no rules, right? And nobody just understand like who own it is Telegram, and it's such kind of things, right? So in following like infrastructure, it's very easy to make this flood, right? In this case, the first applications just to collect data in real time and just do like a narrative analysis. What kind of dangerous narratives we have from this propaganda and manipulation. Also understand their main techniques, because there are some kind of specific scientific papers about techniques which use it for propaganda and manipulation. And for some things we just think, okay, it's some kind of bullshit. But when you just start to analyze, you understand that it's very specific techniques of manipulation and propaganda use it in this content. So it's not a bullshit, right? So in these cases, everything is planned.
Tell me more about the narrative analysis approach, because I imagine some of that narrative analysis still exists in the kind of current
absolutely
form of Mantis. So what was the kind of core process of performing narrative analysis on all the social media content? Are you basically just trying to do kind of like keyword search or key phrase search that is linked to like sentiment analysis? So something that might suggest more anger or be pushing like certain ideas? Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this keyword approach is what is most of the social listening platform using, and I think it's pretty outdated and in legacy in terms of specifically application of for informational risks, right? If you need just monitor like brand or something like that, it's fine, but not for very complicated influence operations, right? So what we do, it's basically pipeline from a lot of like steps. On first steps, we need just to filter out a lot of spam, a lot of duplication, because what we see is that the same content is distributed just for rephrasing. And with generative AI, it's pretty simple. You just take a piece of text and say, rephrase for me, rephrase again, and you just spread that around the social media. So, and it's from one side, it's just different posts. From another side, it's absolutely the same, because it's absolutely the same narrative and absolutely the same goal and absolutely the same actor who's spreading that. So in this case, the first stage, just to filter out spam narrative. Also, we are not interested about some kind of facts, right? For example, President A is arrived in the city, so we are not interested because there is no narrative here. We're interested specifically in piece of context which provide some kind of narrative. In this case, on the second stage, we just extract using our proprietary technology, our AI models. So we extract from this like filtered pieces of context narratives, and after that we do like a clusterization, right, of this narrative, and after that we do some kind of evaluation of impact of these narratives in terms of the outreach, in terms of what kind of sources just spread this narrative. And based on that, we understand what's happened in informational field, what kind of narratives are popular, where is it spreading. And I think what we now also do, we do dissemination analysis. It's some kind of building graphs, how these narratives are spreading, right? Because now in modern informational warfare, it's basically the network of different kind of channels which just report the same information, rephrase, and so on. So it's very complicated graph structures, which we can understand, and based on that, we can stop basically such kind of spreading of disinformation.
It's a really interesting concept that you mentioned early on in our response around how keyword searching is no longer as effective, specifically because you're able to use AI models to just rephrase a message that then uses a variety of different keywords. Are there any specific examples that you can point to of like where this has become increasingly popular and you've kind of seen malicious users make the effort of rephrasing specific text messages?
Yeah. So first of all, very quick example that I want to mention to stress out importance of context. So, for example, one of the tasks that we are doing, it's a geocoding of unstructured text, because we need to understand if something is happening, where is happening exactly, right? And imagine that, for example, in this case, we base it on the keywords, and we have in a piece of text, we have a keyword Zaluzhny. Zaluzhny is the name of ex-commander of Ukrainian military, but it's also a village. It's the name of the village in Ukraine, right? So in this case, without understanding of context, we cannot understand, is it the village or is it like name of like military commander, right? So and absolutely the same situation with the narrative. So in this case, in modern warfare, we need to go deeply, right? We need to go, deeply inside the context, right? And so basically, these narratives have like very strict like impact on the people. For example, like example of narratives, right? US is not interested in the win of Ukraine. They're interested just in prolongation of conflict and so on. This is one of the like narrative which spreading by Russian from the first day of the war. So in this case, we need just using deep context, like extract this narrative, and after that we need to plan some counter narrative operation. So we need to spread in some information, maybe using some government sources and so on, just to opposite this narrative that it's not truth, right? And for that is this intelligence analysis with the eye is very important.
Right, and that also goes back to why the market applies somewhat more to government in terms of having the kind of trusted source that can then provide the counter narrative, or I guess in the corporate space would be similar for like a verified account to go ahead and provide some message that says, hey, no, this is actually what happened. But let's kind of keep this journey going and talk a little bit more about the evolution into a situational awareness platform. So you originally focused on this disinformation piece and then recognized that, okay, there's maybe a larger market that exists here if we think about the kind of broader swath of events that present some level of risk to an organization. And as you alluded to earlier, specifically the events where real-time information, real-time situational awareness is much more important. So can you maybe start by outlining what are the different types of events that you felt were kind of most critical to actually alert an organization of?
Yeah, absolutely. Corporate security guys just say it for us very simple stuff, right? When we're just asking them what is important, it's basically two things are important. It's relevance and timing, right? So in this case, if like basically government is interested in everything, right, which impact their people, that like corporate sector is interested what is impact their business, what is they impact their assets, employees, and so on and so on. That's why relevance is crucially important, because for some industry, like one types of incidents is important, for another like another types. Now we just gathered about 70 types of different kind of incidents. We do like categorization, and also we detect like severity of incidents, and we continuously work to provide relevant incident for specific needs and corporate. I mean, this industry, region, like geolocation, a role of specific security person, and so on. So basically, it's a lot of factors, input factors, which impact like relevance on specific incidents. And also, I think a very important point about connection, right? About connection of this government stream and corporate stream is disinformation, right? Because if we say that like there is some kind of protest is happening near office of company A, the first question now in any of security person, is it real or not? Is it like this? Maybe it's fake. Maybe it's a fake video. It's like it's difficult to differentiate, right? And in this case, it's very good that we already have this expertise, so we can apply it in situation awareness, and we provide not only incident but also some kind of probability of is it like disinformation or not? Is it like generative content or not?
Okay, and so that's one type of event that an organization might be worried about, like a protest that's near one of their offices. What are specific other types of disruptions that an organization might care about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for a lot of the industry, it's crime. So especially, for example, for retail, for distributed like shops and stores and so on. I think the next like category of incidents is natural disasters, which are also like a big deal. And it's interesting that it also became crazy because it's maybe it's also connected with some global warming and so on. But you see what happened with hurricanes, floods in Europe and so on. So it's also like became crazy in this case. Like early awareness, it's very important. And also I think military conflicts is also it's also important, terrorism and so on, because a lot of companies just still operate in very dangerous zone. I mean, in Ukraine, in like Middle East, and also like you see how the situation between like China and Taiwan is developed, and how a big impact can be on the supply chain, and so on and so on. So in this case, yeah, I think be aware about what's happening and do some kind of prediction and so on is like crucially important for all the companies now.
Yeah. Thinking about each of those different examples that you just provided, I think whenever I think about situational awareness and getting this kind of data information, I think, okay, what is the financial impact to the company of either like missing that alert or like how much money are they saving by getting that alert and then able to take some sort of action? I imagine it's slightly different for each of them, but I would love to just kind of hear you talk about it a little bit more. I know you mentioned before the idea that if an employee is flying to an area and was unaware of a conflict, and then the organization, this was a specific example you gave, the organization had to spend like $250,000 to evacuate the person from that country because all of a sudden they found themselves in conflict. I mean, first of all, that's incredibly poor timing that they happened to take off while that conflict was underway. Obviously, most organizations aren't going to be that unlucky in general. But just say a little bit more about the kind of financial value of this kind of platform and maybe elaborate on that example.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you're absolutely right, and we discussed it with users like exact case when just one like alert warning just transform it to evacuation flight, which is cost like $200,000. So in this case, by our research, because we are doing a lot of research and also we talk with a lot of corporate people, approximately about 25% of the revenue of the company just under the threats, under the risks in the modern world, and about 90% of companies like seriously disrupted like last 2 years. And I think this tendency will become like worse and worse in the nearest, because we don't see any optimistic prediction, right, for the next 10 years. So from one perspective, like physical security and informational security is some kind of cost center, right? So it's like directly is not related to profit, but what we are doing in the company, we just evaluate everything as possible in specific like financial losses. Because, for example, if we can automate geopolitical reports with AI, we can save like, hundreds of time of analysts, right? It's some kind of financial losses. If we provide alert in time and we can prevent like business trip, we can like save money for evacuation alert that is like hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? We also have one use case from our design partners that they started to build factory in Latin America without like proper analysis of the protest activism, and they basically lost about $10 million because like protesters like completely blocked the building, and they decided just to cancel they cancel the project. So in this case, in modern world, and especially in following geopolitical situation, we see like a direct correlation between like security intelligence and profit of the companies. And I think there are several examples which just these threats can impact like companies so much that they will become like bankrupt.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting analogy with traditional kind of enterprise cybersecurity, right? Where when you communicate your value, there's a couple different ways that you can do it, whether it's preserving revenue, like removing the cost of like a regulation breach or other breach cost, or at a piece that you mentioned, kind of automating tasks that are otherwise cost centers in your organization. So if you're paying an analyst to do something and you're able to speed up the process for the analyst, then you're saving money that you would have been spending in salary, right? So
Absolutely.
Maybe part of what's valuable here is, could you outline the kind of current approach or current state for how companies think about this kind of monitoring and activity? Like if I'm a Fortune 500 company, do I hire analysts who are kind of combing news reports around the globe in order to get a better understanding? Obviously, it's not quite as robust of infrastructure as, say, like a security operations center where you have 45 analysts monitoring every cybersecurity alert that comes through. But what does that current state actually look like?
So I think if we say like about current state in corporate, I can describe that most of everybody understands that we need to change it. We need to change it dramatically because everything's changed around us. Like security situation changed. Like imagine that Y Combinator just invested in the first defense startup. It's like unbelievable things, but it's happened now, right? So in this case, the world changed dramatically. The security situation changed dramatically, but I think the market is approaching most of the companies is still like pretty conservative. I mean that most of the companies like use legacy systems, sometimes Excel spreadsheets, and like usual copy paste and so on. But from another perspective, I see a huge interest like to AI, right? And we listen like a question, okay, how can I apply AI to my like security process like now? Because you mentioned cybersecurity maybe like few years ahead of like physical and informational and cognitive security, right? Because it's like proven standards, proven like leaders and so on. So I think, and it's closer to IT specifically, right? And in this case, it's maybe like much easier like to apply AI and understand people how we can apply AI in cybersecurity. But if we say about like physical and this new like space of informational and cognitive, I think that is moment when we need to like teach people, right? So how we can using AI like early detect incidents, how we can detect disinformation, and so on, because now there is a huge interest, but I think low level of understanding in general in the industry.
Yeah, to your point, I think you've done a good job conveying the variety of different factors that make this space extra relevant today in comparison to the past, both in terms of technology capabilities that make monitoring and assessing social media type content much simpler, but then also just kind of activities that are going on in the globe from like a geopolitical sense, and also just the kind of like disinformation or tactics that some of these different adversaries are using in order to generate influence. So I think there's a lot of different factors that are culminating that makes this kind of product sensible. And that's maybe a good transition into talking about the kind of a competitive market a little bit more, right? Data Miner is one of the established companies that exist in this space, but obviously you're coming at Mantis from a very unique angle. Again, having basically been in the war zone in Ukraine when the conflict started, and recognizing just opportunities for improvement based on what kind of information was made available. So how do you position Mantis compared to Data Miner and some of these other situational awareness tools that have been around longer than Mantis?
Absolutely. Like first of all, I want to stress out that most of the established players, like born like 20, 25 years ago, and from our perspective, from perspective of young company, from perspective of startup, it's time to change, right? Because everything should be changed in time. So we have a changing of generation of the platform and so on. And we position our like platform and approach as a new generation of situation awareness platform and so on. I think the main differentiation, it's basically several things. First of all, we started from that, right? That it's a different amount of threats that we have. We have absolutely new kind of threats, right? Like deep fakes, disinformational attacks. And the second point is everything is connected, right? Today it's some kind of campaign in social network. tomorrow it's a protest near company offices with killing people and so on. And also it's very dynamic. That's why we are building real time ML company, right? Because time costs a lot, increases situation, and that's what we experience in Ukraine, because you need to react to these incidents in hours and maybe sometimes in minutes. You don't have a time, just, okay, we need to sit, analyze, and blah, blah, blah. No, you need just react exactly now and do action now. And that's what's important for us. It's a low latency on all our intelligence analysis. The next question and next differentiation, it's hyper local expertise. For example, we have a project in Moldova. Moldova, it's a small country in Eastern Europe, but basically we analyze data in 4 languages now in this country with a really deep analysis of language context, right? Because if you see results of the elections of Moldova, I just remind that it's decision join European Union or not. The difference is 0.34 percentages, which impacts exactly decision, right? Should we join or not? So that's why analysis should be very deep and intelligent, right? Because so small amount of people just make a decision, right? And we live in the world of crazy polarization. And we see this polarization in United States, in Moldova, in Georgia, and now in Romania, and so on. So it's happening around the world. World is polarized. That's why we need just to do this intelligence analysis. We need to go very deeply in language context, in specific local context. And also, I think what is important for us as a company is that is also our differentiation. It's some kind of modern interface and interaction with the system, right? Because most of our competitors have legacy interfaces from 90s and so on. So we do our interface is very modern, and also using Copilot, because all the requests to their platforms can be done in a very simple way, in just using texting and so on. So we want to simplify this analytic process with the system, do it very robust and effective.
Yeah, interesting. So it sounds like a combination of the kind of AI first design, because you guys are a newer company, the hyper localization in terms of just understanding events in local regions, and then UI, which obviously makes a big difference if you have an old company that kind of gets complacent. So that makes a ton of sense. Awesome. Well, Maksym, I think you've given a lot of interesting insight into this whole world of kind of physical and information security, which I think plays nicely with the realm of cybersecurity. And there's kind of interesting parallels across each of these industries, but also some very interesting differences. So I appreciate you taking some time and walking through your story here. Thank you.
So absolutely, it's very interesting because, for example, you can remember incident from CrowdStrike, right? And there is a question: is it cyber security incident, or maybe it's much more, right? Because after that, a lot of air companies was disrupted, some protests, blah 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 blah. So it's not only cyber security issue, right? So that's what we see in the modern world. That, as I say, short time today, everything is connected, everything is related. In this case, I think we have a lot of parallels with the cybersecurity in terms of the issue detection, protection, reporting, and so on. And we see that we can bring a lot of best practices and standards from cybersecurity to the space of physical security and the space of informational cognitive security. Because for me, like personally, like dangerous narrative, disinformation, deepfake, it's also like cybersecurity issue, which can like cost a lot for the company, for government, and so on and so on. So now maybe for most of the people, like it's not recognized as the same like level and so on. But I think like it will be changed in the next years. I think it's the level of threats will be equal between like cybersecurity, informational security, physical security. So that's why like strategically, if we see like on Mantis Analytics in 5 years, we want to have everything in one place, right? Because now there is one system for cybersecurity, there is one system for social media, another system like for situation awareness and so on. It's very distributed, right? But we want to make one centralized platform to help company be resilient in the following like situation.
Right. I think there's no question the lines are kind of continuing to blur. And you even see that at DEF CON over time as well, right? Where you get the kind of anti-tampering village and the lock-picking village and the physical security and cybersecurity worlds are joined together. And to your point, I think information security is going to be increasingly wrapped up into that with deepfakes and disinformation and all that. So awesome. Maksym, really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for coming on the episode and best of luck.
Yes, thanks very much. Very productive discussion, and I'm happy to spend this time with you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can write to me at kyle@secureventures.io. I'm Kyle McNulty, and you've been listening to Secure Ventures.